97.3 ESPN presents The Sports Bash with Mike Gill. It's time for Football at 4 with 97.3 ESPN.com's Andrew DiCecco. Powered by the Inside the Birds podcast.
You know, we recognize the ability of the roster that's put together right now. And I think we have the ability to do something really special with this group, but it's going to take a lot of hard work.
Now, live from inside the Matt Black Kia Studios, it's Football at 4.
All right, Football at 4 powered by the Inside the Birds podcast and brought to you locally by PlaceSugarHouse.com. Sign up now. They'll match your first deposit up to $250. Right now at 97.3 ESPN.com, Andrew DiCecco's observations from a dismal victory over the Cowboys, but it's still a win nonetheless. You're 3-4-1. First place Eagles have a bye this week, but let's get into it from last night. It was a ugly one. I thought maybe, Andrew, it was one of the worst Carson Wentz performances and one of the worst Doug Pederson performances. As a team, they were both dismal, as the word that you used. But let's start with the quarterback. Very erratic from Carson Wentz. 4 turnovers in the game. And I don't know, at this point, 5 years in, 8 games into the season, is this fixable or is this who he is?
Well, you mentioned that it was probably the worst game from the Doug Pederson and Carson Wentz era. I actually thought that was the worst half of football that I've ever seen. So, it was just a mess from top to bottom. It got to the point where I was like, what am I even watching here? I think that this is kind of what Carson is now. I mean, he's going to be a streaky quarterback who tends to play up to the levels of his competition and down to the level of his competition. You know, the thing with hero ball, which is what he tends to play, you take the good with the bad. You're going to see a lot of plays that he's going to extend, that a lot of quarterbacks would throw the football away or maybe kind of just take a sack, and he's going to maybe get out of there and, run out, create yards outside of the pocket or chuck it deep and connect with somebody that maybe some other quarterbacks won't. But then you're also going to see the errors and the miscues and things that can kind of set teams back. Had these things not happened, you're not having to play, hero ball in the second half. And that's happening way too frequently for the Eagles right now.
Yeah, I mean, some of the throws, the decisions in some of the throws, again, I mean, it's like every week we hear Doug say, we can't do this. And then we hear Carson say, I got to be better. And, quite frankly, it's the same throws. It's a throw high here, a throw a little off here, a throw behind the guy there, a bad decision. I mean, this is all encompassing. And quite frankly, I think it's the main reason that this team is 3-4-1.
Yeah, and you hear this on the Inside the Birds podcast with Jeff and Adam when they mention, is Carson being coached hard enough? And I think that's a very valid question and something that isn't talked about nearly enough when you look at his production under John DiFilippo, who was known to be a very tough coach on Carson. He got the best out of him. He rode him pretty hard, but I mean. And Carson didn't always like that. But then you have a guy like Press Taylor who's closer in age to Carson. They're friends. You don't necessarily know how constructive his criticism is with Carson. Does he kind of give him free rein to do whatever he wants? And those are valid concerns. And when you kind of see his play regress, each year seemingly, and now you're seeing a lot of streakiness to his play. It's definitely something that you have to wonder what's going on there. And wonder if this is going to continue, and this is kind of just who he is.
Yeah, it's definitely frustrating because no matter how he is getting coached, which I do normally go down that road, I think about a quarterback in his 5th year and some of these plays, it doesn't matter. Like, you shouldn't have to be told to not make some of the plays that he's been trying to make. I want to get your thoughts, though, on Doug Pederson. What frustrated you the most out of his game plan?
Hunter, it feels like every week there's always some sort of a coaching blunder that he seems to have. And this week he tried to be aggressive, but against the Dallas team that, is historically bad, run your offense. I thought that they got too cute too often with some of the play designs, and, running the football at Boston Scott was yielding, plenty of, chunk plays and, get him involved in the passing game. Like, you don't have to pull the Philly special out like he did with Greg Ward on that 3rd and 6, or go for it on Dallas's 44, on 4th and 3. Like, these are certain things, Hunter, when you mentioned some of the things that really stuck out to me. These are frustrating things that, when things are spiraling out of control in the first half, these things kind of can tend to snowball against better teams. And I just think that some of his risks and gambles need to be a little bit more calculated.
You mentioned in your piece over at 97.3 ESPN.com, your observations was on, in fact, questionable coaching decisions resurfacing. I thought he called an awful game. I mean, I thought it's 3rd down and 3. You're running the ball all over him. And then they go for it on 4th and 3. It's like if you go for it if you know you're going for it on 4th, why would you not run the ball on the 3rd down? The 4th down play call, I thought just the questionable coaching decisions have really been a problem. I mean, it has left me scratching my head almost all season long, but nothing more than last night. And you wonder, what is going on with this the whole coaching college of guys that they have. It feels like they just have not figured out their roles yet on this offense in terms of what their game plan is, what their identity is. And I get it. The identity of this team has got to be tough with the injuries and such, but Doug Pederson's not helping them.
No, and like you said, taking into account all the injuries, their margin of error is so small that the coaching needs to be 100% on point. You don't really need to get creative against these teams. You talk about the different coaching mistakes that were made last night. How about that 4th and 1 where he decided to throw an out route to Travis Fulgham into the wind when, I would have opted for maybe a quarterback sneak or handed off to your running back Boston Scott, who had a very productive first half. These are things that, when you have a team like this in disarray, you need to make sure that you're playing to the strengths of the players that you have. And in the past, he's done that, but now he almost seems to be outsmarting himself. You wonder how many, you mentioned all the different coaches that are there now, how many different voices are there? And is it just becoming, is there kind of too many chefs in the kitchen?
This is where I'm having trouble trying to figure out what happened last night. So you mentioned the throw into the wind to Fulgham. How about those bombs to Hightower? Is that Carson Wentz just making horrendous decisions, or is that a game plan? Go out and take those big shots. The wind took the one throw, then he had the interception in the back of the end zone in double coverage to the right side. Is that a game plan out of Doug Pederson, or is that Carson Wentz just making terrible decisions? Or a combination of both as well could be a factor.
Yeah, Hunter, I think it's actually the second part of what you said. I think this is kind of Carson Wentz being who he is. If you listen to him after the game, he said something that really stuck out to me. He says, I'm not going to change my approach. I'm not wired to hesitate. So he's going to continue to be aggressive is what he said. So these are the things you're going to continue to see. I think some of those, there was plays in the short to intermediate routes in the intermediate games that I thought there were opportunities there to attack with Greg Ward and Travis Fulgham in certain instances. And I thought that a couple of those plays to John Hightower, you have to really look at the probability of connecting on some of those plays. You look at the wind, and John Hightower has been up and down as a rookie as far as tracking the football. You certainly don't want to lay it out there to Hightower, given the swirling winds that are there, and when things are underneath there, that you can kind of capitalize on. I think that's just a product of Carson Wentz. We talked about the hero ball. These are things that he likes to do. And, when he connects on those plays, no one says anything, but that's what I mean by what you take with the good and bad with someone of his mentality.
Question is, look, it's not about making the playoffs this year and making a deep run. This is about the long-term viability of this franchise with this guy. 5 years in, do we know who he is?
I think after you've seen, obviously that 2017 season it was unprecedented. He was off the charts with his performance. But I think there's enough data there over the past 3 seasons to kind of gauge where he's at. You're going to see someone who's going to the guys play hard for him. He puts the team on his back. He's going to, his energy is always there, and he's going to, find ways to extend plays outside the pocket. And at times that's to his detriment and to the offense's detriment because there's other plays to be made. He doesn't need to always do everything himself. And as far as some of these games, like I said, he's playing down to the level of his competition in many instances. And he's surprising against games like the Ravens and the Steelers. You have to wonder what's going on there, and why does he always seem to play better when his back's against the wall? We have yet to see a full performance, a full Carson Wentz performance, kind of reminiscent of the 2017 season. We have not seen that this season. And I think this is kind of what he is. He's going to be, a very turbulent quarterback that you're going to experience the ups and downs with, and you're going to kind of have to navigate through that if he's your guy.
Andrew DiCecco, Football at 4. A lot to dive into on this one. Obviously, Carson Wentz struggled last night. 4 turnovers. He also 12 interceptions on the season. He's fumbled 7 times. 4 of those have been recovered by the opposing team. There's a stat out there from Pro Football Focus that he has 23 turnover plays. The next closest quarterback only has 13. In other words, he's constantly putting his team and putting himself in position to turn the ball over, whether it's a turnover or not. He's taking so many risks, and he said it last night, I guess early this morning, which was, hey, I'm not going to get away from that. This is what I do. I don't want to get away from that guy. But, he makes that throw in the back of the end zone, double covered, the throw to Hightower. Now, the Hightower one's interesting because of all the receivers, that's the one guy who's been healthy the whole time. It's like you'd think that he might have something with him, but I feel like Doug almost has to – I feel like Doug has too much trust in him at times.
Yeah, and I also think that Carson has, he's kind of stubborn. He thinks he can make every throw, and he wants to shoulder the offense and make the plays make the plays that these elite quarterbacks are making. And he believes he can squeeze the football in there and connect on some of these deep shots to these guys. And he's done it before, and I think he just goes to the well far too often instead of taking what the defense is giving him. And I think that's, like I said, that's to his detriment, and that's some of the reason why you're seeing a significant regression in his performance is because he's straying away from what's made him so successful in the past, and he's trying to do too much.
What are your thoughts on the usage of tight ends last night? With Dallas Goedert playing 84% of the snaps, to see 1 catch in that third quarter, I just think, look, Carson Wentz, when he does struggle, like he looks for a safety blanket, it's normally the tight end spot. Rodgers, who had success in earlier games this season, he wasn't much of a factor. So all around, why don't you think the tight ends had more to contribute than they did?
Yeah, that's interesting because, outside of Travis Fulgham, who had 6 catches for 78 yards, and he's been the most consistent pass receiver for the Eagles in the past 5 weeks, you go down the list. Jalen Reagor only had 16 yards, Goddard 15, Greg Ward 10, Boston Scott 9, and Corey Clement 4. Nobody outside of Fulgham was able to do anything, and nobody on offense really did anything. I was kind of puzzled that you don't go to your safety valve, go to your tight ends, that hit those connect on those middle seams. Richard Rodgers didn't even have a target last night, and he was someone that had 85 yards, which was his best game since 2015 last year. Or last week, to not utilize, the middle of the field where the Cowboys had proven to be very vulnerable, was kind of puzzling. I just thought that he was pressing too much, and he really couldn't get any semblance of anything going on offense. So I didn't really read too much into it because when you look at everybody else's production, nobody really did anything either.
I want to get your thoughts on Fulgham and the offense here and his role in this offense. As he asked about the tight ends, I'm intrigued. I was intrigued, and I'll ask you, should I be, to see Reagor, Ward, Fulgham, Goddard, and then when they get Sanders back. Is that a competent offense?
Yeah, it is, Mike. And you really there's a lot of diversity to the players that you've mentioned. You have Fulgham, who's your X, and he has the ability to win these contested catch situations and work all 3 levels of the field. Jalen Reagor is a deep threat who can also high point the football. He can also make contested catches, but he can also do damage on jet sweeps and on screen passes and in the open field. And Dallas Goedert is an explosive tight end that can make plays in the middle seam and also can test teams vertically. Greg Ward, we know what he is. He's a reliable possession slot receiver, not a vertical slot by any means. He knows how he has terrific spatial awareness and good short area quickness. He's not going to really give you much more after the catch. He's going to just take his 10 yards and keep it moving and move those chains. But there's a lot of guys there that you got to establish that continuity, and I think that's their point by throwing these guys out there and getting them their snaps. These are going to be the pieces of the future, and I think that there's something there. They all bring something different and unique to the offense, and I think in time, you're going to see everything start to kind of connect.
How do you think the offensive line played? Because before the game, you had Lane Johnson, who we thought was going to be available. Mailata got thrown in at right tackle. So how do you think they played for Carson Wentz?
I actually thought that they played pretty well. I thought Jason Peters and Nate Herbig got good push in the running game. I thought Mailata, outside of maybe one miscue or two, held his own at right tackle. Jason Kelsey was steady as always. That's the thing. The offensive line, you can't use that as a crutch this week, because I thought that they actually played fairly well. All things considered, they were just getting, and that also goes to my point. Why get away from the running game? I believe Boston Scott had 66 yards or something in the first half. To kind of abandon that when you're getting push up front, and they created a nice pocket for him, and I thought that they played pretty well, all things considered. And you talk about after the bye week, you might get someone like you're going to get a Jack Driscoll back and possibly an Isaac Seumalo. This is kind of the best of the offensive line is going to look the rest of the way.
I think when you look at it's funny because you mentioned, we talked about Fulgham and the weapons and getting that offensive line back. I don't know that this is the last of this offensive line. Like when Lane Johnson comes back, are we sure that Peters won't move back to guard? Like, do you still think this is the configuration that basically Mailata will go back to being the backup swing tackle? Because I agree. I thought Mailata held himself, other than early, obviously Lawrence beat him early in the game, but I thought he did a nice job. I thought Herbig was good in the run game, as you mentioned. I think he struggled a little bit in pass protection, but for the most part, you wonder if when Johnson's back, do they go back to Mailata at left tackle and then move Peters back to guard?
That's probably what I would do. You want to always have your best guys out there. And I think that Jordan Mailata has proven, at left tackle to be better than what Nate Herbig can give you a guard. So I think that you can put Jason Peters there. He'll play just fine. You get Lane Johnson out there. You have Jack Driscoll on hand as a reserve. I just think that there's too much to lose by sitting down Jordan Mailata and robbing him of these opportunities to really refine his game and get that experience that he needs. Because if he's not going to get it now, well, when is he going to get it? He talked about someone that has not played football prior to American football prior to 2018. He needs all the snaps that he can get, and he's playing at a fairly high level outside of the Giants game, which was his worst game to date. I thought that he's shown signs that proven that he really deserves to play that role. And Jason Peters played well yesterday, but I think that you can kick him inside, get Lane out there, and have all your have your strongest guys out there. That to me would be the best, strongest contingent.
Yeah, I asked that because if that one series last night where they really zoned in on Zach Martin and showed like, hey, you have your best player, you run behind him, and I'm really intrigued about seeing Peters play guard next to Lane Johnson and having your two quote-unquote best. I don't know that Peters is still your best, but I think they think that he's still a very good player, and having those two guys play next to each other and starting to run behind those guys.
Yeah, and we talk about the offensive line being in flux all season long and all the constant shuffling. I think once you get everyone healthy, it might require one more shuffling, like you were alluding to get all those guys in place. But I think that's the best formula for sustained success.
How do you feel about all these 2-point conversions being called?
Last night, the only thing I could think of is maybe because of the wind, but I think that it has to do with Doug, just his aggressive nature and kind of living and dying by the sword there. It didn't cost them last night, but it has cost them in the past.
All right, and it's funny. I think last night I think he was just kind of doing it for the math purposes last night. And the fact of the matter is this: I thought Dallas, a severely undermanned team, was better prepared last night, and that's an indictment on your coaching staff, right?
Exactly, and I'll tell you this: there's pretty much you're not going to win playing like that against virtually any other team in the NFL. In fact, I think if they played this way against the Giants on last Thursday, a couple Thursdays ago, they lose that game. They're going to have to reevaluate where they're at as a team. And, Doug's going to have to look at himself in the mirror, Carson Wentz. To a man, they're going to have to really take a step back and figure out what direction are they headed during this bye week, because I'll tell you what, the upcoming slate of games only gets tougher.
Hey, tomorrow is the trade deadline. Andrew's back with us tomorrow, so we'll talk about it. But, number one, do we anticipate anything happening? And number two, if they do something, what is it?
I mean, if it's me, if I'm Howie, I'm making a call to the New York Jets to try and get Frank Gore in there. You talk about what he can give as a between the tackles grinder, but also as a pass protecting running back. The Jets are, it's a lost season for them. Things are, souring. Everything's starting to sour on Adam Gase and around that whole environment. And I think that you're starting to see, you saw Avery Williamson, the linebacker, move on to the Pittsburgh Steelers yesterday. There just seems to be a fire sale there. And I think that the Eagles could stand for an upgrade behind Miles Sanders.
It's actually a pretty eye-opening answer there. I wasn't expecting that, but not bad. Getting that veteran running back in there that can pass protect, do some things in short yardage and that stuff. I thought Boston played well last night, but, you need that veteran pass protector. And Miles Sanders, it's funny. As much as we're questioning Wentz, you're starting to question whether Sanders can stay healthy over the 16-game season as your lead number one back.
But yeah, most definitely. I mean, Miles Sanders, if he plays last night, he gets probably 150 yards on, maybe on 10 carries. But availability has been, it's
big
been
problem.
called to.
Yep.
Yeah, it's been a big problem this year. So I do think that, while you have gotten some stuff from some positive things from Boston Scott, and even, to a degree, Corey Clement last night, which is a rarity, you do need to get in my opinion, you do need a veteran running back that can step in and play because, like I said, like we talked about, Miles Sanders has not proven that he can do that this season.
Get Andrew's observations right now at 97.3ESPN.com. He's got 3 observations from that Eagles, loss, that win last night, but felt like a loss. It was ugly, but they got the job done. 3-4-1, first place at the bye week. They have the Giants in 2 weeks, and we'll have more on that game, of course, leading into it. Andrew, we'll talk to you tomorrow, man.
You got it, guys. Have a great night.
And Football at 4, powered by the Inside the Birds podcast. They dropped that this morning with reaction on that game last night. And, man, everybody, like, I fraudulent slip. I said that loss.
Well, that's what it feels like.